Okay, y'all, we're going to get started now. These are our last two presentations of the afternoon, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Vanessa Keitges. Vanessa is President and CEO of Columbia Green Technologies, whose core technologies in Ecoroofs are based on sustainable functions that help manage the quality and quantity of stormwater, energy use, as well as air and water pollution. She also serves as the co-chair of Greenroofs for Healthy Cities and leads national discussions on green roof programs and policies. So please welcome Vanessa.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me. I'm actually very honored to be standing here. We are fortunate to travel throughout the country to speak about green roofs to different city officials. And that's really thanks to what the city of Portland did with regards to the Ecoroof department. My conversation today is about the return on investments for green roofs, and that's really an economic discussion. And I'm fortunate to be up here to talk about that and the market growth and what that does for companies like Columbia Green. Just a brief history, just so you know. Again, because we are a spin-out of good eco-roof policy here in Portland, we've had continued to grow over the last 3 years, 200% year over year. So here we have great green policy by cities, companies designing new technology to meet that policy, and then other cities throughout the country looking at what Portland is doing and how they can move forward with not just one building, but eco-districts. And a lot of that is because of what Portland has done from an innovative area. So again, I'm very honored to be standing here because if it wasn't for Portland and their progressive thinking for innovating, and I know Tom's somewhere out here, there he is, I wouldn't even be standing here with a company that, again, that's continued to grow and grow every year. And we actually made Forbes last year as one of the top 5 tech companies to watch over the next couple years. The other 4 companies were software companies, and we're actually a green tech company. So we're very proud of that, and I'm thankful to be standing here. So how we're able to do that is, again, it's great when we have a mission, and we do. Everybody is all for green infrastructure. We all know the benefits of it from an environmental standpoint. But from a business standpoint, it's really important that I call it a margins with a mission. That it's important that in order to scale this worldwide and truly change the skylines in every city, and I call it roots to roof approach, putting green infrastructure in, we have to ensure that there's the economic play and that we continue to create innovative designs, innovative products, that installers, maintenance, all of that creates jobs, which then allows us to continue to push the mission forward. So that's just a little bit, again, about Columbia Green, and my speech or presentation today, again, is more focused around the return on investment for both a building and the cities, basically. So just a little bit about the market is that, and I just received word actually from Greenroof for Healthy Cities that the market grew again 24% last year. It was about, according to Greenroof for Healthy Cities, about a $500 million market in North America. And Lex Research just recently came out and said globally the green roof market will be about $7 billion. With the green wall market, which is also another important piece, again with the green infrastructure overall, will actually be about $7.7 billion globally. So again, we're seeing the numbers around this, which allows other companies and allows us to continue to drive this from an economic standpoint. And I think you'll consider, or we'll see someday, green roofs on bus stop. I know we're doing bus stops, but now we'll see it on buses too. So that's a little bit about the market. So why is it growing? Again, I'm not going to go into all of this because I know you guys are very familiar with probably the LEED and all the different, you see it all over the place, all the many benefits that green roofs give, obviously. They're a major impact for a city from a green infrastructure standpoint. But the biggest one is the stormwater management piece. And that's where we are really going into cities and seeing how we can help with regards to lowering fees and things like that. And with regards to the stormwater management piece, and some of you already know this, but I know there's some out here just learning, is that what we're trying to do is basically, it's a green infrastructure play. What can we do to slow down the storm water? So how can we put in bioswales, rainwater harvesting, and green roofs as a way to slow down that water so that it doesn't combine with the sewage, which we call a combined sewage overflow, which then flows into, obviously, our lakes or our rivers. And so that's what's happening here. And actually, these are just signs. We actually have an office in D.C., and recently this was something up near our D.C. office. So things that happen when the rain happens. This picture below actually is a picture of Philly. Philly also is going to be implementing green infrastructure with their gray infrastructure to help manage water runoff. So instead of going back and looking at some of the old pipes, and I do mean old, New York City, for example, dates back to like 1896. So some of these pipes are still wood and brick. So instead of going back and ripping up the streets and updating those pipes, can we bring in green infrastructure the way that it used to look to manage that with bioswales, green walls, and green roofs? Again, and that image is from Philly. So what, for example, Philly would look like is this is what it would look like in 10 years. This is out of the Philly Water Department. But again, using green infrastructure, which completely changes the way the city looks, which it does all the other benefits, but this definitely is a water play from a stormwater management. Again, this is out of the Philly Water Department. So we're seeing this growth all across the country. Like I said, in 2011, the market grew 115%. Looked like it grew 24% last year. And we continue to see growth. So it's this water play that really helps us. But there are different benefits. We are seeing, of course, the heat island effect play even a bigger role, working after now the Hurricane Sandy. Again, these cities, even in New Jersey, it's amazing to see some of the mayors come out and talk about green infrastructure to help with their water runoff. But they're also looking at it very seriously now. I think you saw Bloomberg come out even and talk about the climate change, which is great when you have that happening on the East Coast. And a lot of this is the heat island effect. Again, is there ways in which we can cool the city down, and when those storms start coming in, they go right back out. So you will hear this conversation more. There's been a lot of, again, around the stormwater management, but just in the last 6 months or so on the East Coast, we have been hearing a lot more about the heat island effect in which these cities will rebuild. Policy drives this, as you know, and it's not necessarily always subsidies. In many cases, there's the FAR bonuses. It's moving first to the permitting line. These are all things out there that cities are doing to try and incentivize building owners to move forward with implementing this type of green infrastructure and green roofs. So again, across the country, it's very different. But the long-term ROI, so companies like myself, what we do is we go in and talk to building owners about their current setup, both new and existing, and look at what is going on in each city, whether it's DC, Philly, Seattle, and look at what their current stormwater fees are, their setup fees, and start putting together a program in which in every city is very different. It's very fragmented. Each municipality has different ways that they manage their stormwater and their fees. So we have to go in and really understand that. And then cities usually, again, put something in place for us to go in and make it beneficial for the building owner to be so progressive, which is awesome. It's been obviously very helpful for us. And but some other things besides stormwater, and I'll get into some examples in a minute. We also prolong the life of the membrane, which is very important for a building owner. So, for example, if the roof was only a 10-year warranty or a 10-year roof, they now know that the roof will last 2 to 3 times longer. So you're looking, and it can be even longer than that. But let's say you're looking at 30, 40 years. You're now not having to rip off that old roof, which takes, in a city environment anyways, blocking the streets, hiring a crew, removing that roof, and then paying for a new roof. And if we can save somebody 2 to 3 times that for a building owner that owns their building, whatever it might be, 50 to 100 years, it's very valuable. So we definitely go in and look at how much longer we can help them last their roof and what kind of warranty they're going to get. Increased property value. Definitely that's something that we look at, particularly in office space. Even in our office, we have a green roof. But you'll see office spaces that overlook a green roof can get higher rents than others. You can see even in hospitals, there's some of the new work that we're doing around rehabilitation and people feeling better. These are hospitals moving forward with this progressive approach because people will just rehabilitate faster, and hospitals know that they need to do this be progressive. Hospitals were actually a number one niche for us last year. Everybody always assumes it's government buildings, but it wasn't. It was actually hospitals for us was one of the biggest. Increased occupancy, it's very interesting. I don't know if anyone has seen the new Facebook and Google campuses. You should look it up. They're amazing. They're completely all green and green roofs. And this is all around trying to retain the students and these new employees and have a really healthy place to live. In fact, I heard one time someone say, if I asked you to close your eyes right now, and then you'd fall asleep, so don't. And 99% of you, if I asked you with your eyes closed and I said, where would you like to be right now? You would choose either the lake, skiing, the beach, outside. And so this is what we call living architecture, that people naturally like to be in the outside. And so how can we bring that in? And places like I said, Facebook and Google, if you haven't seen their new campuses, it's pretty rad. Trying to get people probably to stay at work longer, which increases productivity. So there's ROI there too. There is an energy savings impact. Portland State and Toronto University put together an energy calculator. So depending on the building size, there isn't an R value there, but they have a calculator. And again, depending on the size, if it's a historical building, we could tend to add insulation on the top of that roof and allow the heat or air conditioning to stay in. But it can be very limited, and it definitely just depends on the size of building. But there is an energy calculator out there to help with that. PR, again, it just depends on the type of building, but this could be something that they want to market. I will say that we do have an office in D.C., and Mayor Gray is also, D.C. is, I believe, close to Chicago and the #1 green roof city in North America. They definitely love taking pictures of their roofs and showing what D.C. is doing to be green. That's a PR marketing play, too. So I talked a little bit about the health and employee benefits with Facebook and some of the hospitals. We qualify for LEED points. And then, of course, it's beautiful. So, but the biggest play is the stormwater, which I'm going to go into a couple examples. One of our partners, clients, is Simon Malls, which is one of the largest mall owners across the country. And their fines, because of a lot of the parking lot runoff, were almost $10 million last year. So when you start seeing fines around stormwater and the different fees, that's when companies like Simon Malls take a look at how can we, in our parking lots, put green infrastructure, use green roofs. Another important play is we're working, Walmart actually here in Oregon has a green roof. We did one in Vancouver, and there's several in Chicago. And people often wonder, what Walmart's doing a green roof? They don't seem so sustainable. It's definitely, again, a water play. Doing some sustainability, but in Vancouver where we did it, Surrey, they actually have this type of green roofing in place to help reduce their stormwater fees. So you'll see a company like Walmart in Vancouver, for example, putting a green roof on. And a recent example for us, which is significant, is up in Seattle, and it's the New Experience Music Project, which is this EMP is a music museum, basically. They're building a second building. We did this with Vulcan, and basically we were able to, Vulcan decided to not only do a green roof, but we started integrating with the rainwater harvesting. And the setup fees, because it's a new building, so they needed to set up to the stormwater, was about $300,000. And the city reduced their fee to about $150,000 in their area. So when you start seeing with developers like Vulcan and building owners like that, this is Paul Allen, that's when they really start going, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And we start seeing it again and again. And interestingly enough, I actually sat this morning. We have here in Portland what's called We Build Green Cities, and there's a few companies in which we've worked together to do a lot of the Pearl District, the South Waterfront. We now have got this eco district where we're really trying to take a district approach to managing water and energy, not just a building, but take a real approach to how we can build something that's going to last a long time for the city and really make an impact on the infrastructure. And the mayor's office actually today said this integrated approach that we're looking at with pushing the envelope of all of our companies trying to work together to be more integrated. Right now, a lot of us are silo. We might do a green roof, we might do rainwater harvesting, we might do a retention tank, but we're not always all talking together. So how do we integrate all of us together to make a larger impact? And they came out with some of GluMac as the engineering firm. They came out, it looks like we're going to save the city about $1 million in this new integrated approach in this eco-district area, and having our companies, again, talking together. So it's very much, I will say, the great thing about Portland for us, we take this, we build green cities. We've learned a lot of lessons over the years because we've been doing a lot. Building better technology and better design, and then we can go to other cities and really take those lessons and apply them in those cities, which again is allowing us to continue to grow. And when we do that in those local cities, I will say they continue to see job growth and job creation around green infrastructure, which is really important. So real quickly, just the categories. Again, most of the people think that we're just in the subsidies business. Is this government money that's paying for this? No, it's not. Actually, I can tell you, again, and probably the 100 projects that we did last year, maybe 10 of them were like that. Again, majority of the time, we're going in there to really try and figure out how we can be a return on investment for the building owner. So we see a lot of universities, hospitals, multi-use buildings. We do government buildings, hotels. We're doing some urban gardens, actually, on hotels and restaurants. Company headquarters, actually, it looks like they did include the new Facebook campus, which is right up there to the left. And then the big one that I love, which is when you know you've really made an impact, is the sports stadiums. We're part of what's called the Green Sports Alliance. And sports, actually, this is a pretty great story about how we can use sports and the fans to really change the way consumers think. Sports really believes the last time they made a huge impact was during the civil rights movement with number 43 or 42, I think, Jackie Robinson. I'm a member of this, and I think I know it. But anyways, sports really takes responsibilities from back in the civil rights when African Americans were not allowed to play on the baseball field. And when baseball allowed that, it really changed the mindset of the American people. And sports has decided, the Green Sports Alliance and stadiums across the country of all sorts have decided to take on sustainability and look at their stadiums and the way that they manage waste, the way that their water, their energy, and if they can actually make an impact in their stadium and show the consumer how to recycle, how water, how energy is, that they truly can change the way in which consumers think. And that this room would change from being 100, 200 people to 10,000, 20,000 people to really learn how we can make an impact. And that's really amazing to me when you start seeing sports get involved, and their mission is now sustainability. And so I think it's pretty rad that they're doing that. We're very honored to be a part of that. And I think you'll really start to see this change and this shift, again, with sports grabbing onto it. So lastly, I'll just go quickly through what a green roof looks like. You already knew this, I'm not gonna bore you. But basically, we look at it as 3 parts. You put the membrane down, then we lay down hard parts, irrigation if you want, flashing to go around the system. There's what's called built-ups and trays. There's both. And there's there's pros and cons for both. It just depends on what you're trying to do. There's then growing media, engineered growing media. We don't put soil or dirt up there. It's all definitely engineered. And then we have plants of all sorts, again, just depending on what the building owner wants to do, their budget. It depends on what types of plants we're going to put up onto the roof. And we've got extensive, which you already know this is some of the smaller ones, projects we did up in Alaska, all over the country. and intensive, of course, which even in Chicago is a lovely, even considered green roof. So these are what we call intensive systems. So with that, we have all sorts, extensive, intensive, but that's basically, again, the movement. I kind of wanted to share more of the economic side of it, the return on investment side of it. And does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Are there studies that can show what the return is as opposed to the categorical statement that there's return?
Yeah, so it's pretty individual. We actually have to work to the building. It's every building owner, we then have to work with the civil engineer and put together something building by building right now. It's not like we have a model where we can just apply it across the board, unfortunately. It's building by building. Case study, which is why I kind of put the Vulcan EMP project up there, where they're the first ones. I don't know if you saw Jason Twill. He actually gave me a quote so I could put it up here for you. It actually took the engineers. He actually pushed his team to think differently, besides not just using gray infrastructure, but to using the green infrastructure and putting together the return on investment. And he actually said it was very difficult. You know, Vulcan is a very large developer up in Seattle, and usually the engineer just tends to just go with the gray or not push the green because they couldn't find the ROI. He actually pushed them to find the ROI, and they did find an ROI. But it's definitely something we have to push building by building owner.
Are any of those public buildings public record?
Public buildings, public record. No, but I could give you the private sector ones, the return ones, if you'd like. Okay.
Are there any studies which have clearly analyzed the doubling or tripling of the life expectancy of the roof system?
Yeah, so great question. In Europe, actually, they have the longest systems because they've been doing it longer than we have. And they show even 30, 40, 50 years. Why that is basically what breaks down the roof membrane is the UV. That's what actually wears it down. So if you can actually cover it, whether it's a green roof or a ballast, that's when you get the longevity. So what roofing manufacturers that manufacture the membrane do, they know this. So for example, they used to give only 10-year warranties on their roof. Now if you cover it, whether it was a green roof or ballast, which is actually rock, you'll start seeing them put together like 20 and 30-year warranties. It's actually coming from the roofing manufacturers. Yeah.
So what's the, when they actually go to re-roof, what's the, how much more expensive is it to re-roof than the other plan?
So the question is, how much more is it to re-roof?
I mean, is it more? I mean, because we actually haven't had this question from an owner yet, but
Yeah.
I imagine I will. Like, so it's 20 years down the line, I got to re-roof or what the
Yeah, you'll have to remove the system and then replace it, and then put the system back on. They do, well, and it just depends on what type of plants you use. So there's what's called multi-layer and trays, and then it depends on how many inches of growing media you have. It depends on what type of plants you have, how you're going to tear that system apart. So are you just picking up a tray and removing it, or are you picking up, bushes and trees and trying to remove it? So every project's going to be a little bit different. Now, are you talking about the re-roofing cost? Yeah, so it definitely costs money to remove the green roof and then put it back on, definitely. So the other thing of that, because we've actually had to do some of those, is if we tend, and there's, again, it just depends on your type of building, so there's never a right or wrong in a type of system. There really isn't. We tend to, you'll hear a lot more about trays if we can just pick them up and remove them off. And sometimes that is easy and sometimes it's not. It just depends on the building. And then sometimes you'll hear about these built-up systems. And it just depends on the type of building and what the cost is going to be. Now, to actually pay for a new roof, a re-roof, just so you know, ranges between, $3 and $7 a square foot to re-roof a cost. Tom, did I see you raise your hand? Or do you want to add something?
I was just going to say, yeah. It's likely that the green part probably is still
Yeah.
You don't have to buy food in, so taking it off and putting it back is probably much less expensive than buying it from scratch. Although there could be certain circumstances where,
Yeah.
depending on the project, there's some individual projects that take just take off and scrap it and recycle it. So it's a whole range of things. It would be a good idea to walk through that on your project so that your client knows, for my building, here's what we have, here's what we have, here's what we have. It's a really good question.
Well, and I was going to say for the states, Tom, don't you too agree? So we've been doing this about 10 years, right? Europe's been doing it a lot longer. So we haven't had the experience as much yet either in what's going to look like in 30, 40, 50 years, like Europe does. Probably the same, though.
Well, we do have one reference,
Oh.
a relative reference in the United States. It's the old-fashioned wood garden or the intensive green. So we've got green roofs in Portland that are 30, 40, by another at least 40 years old. And I've talked to some of them, they've never replaced the membrane or any of it. It's just always, it's been what everybody says. It's membrane's protected. and
Yeah.
it's lasted
No UV.
for a long time. So those are good reference points for us, versus not having long-term.
Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth. Can everyone hear you?
What we're finding is that removing a green roof is actually just about the same as removing a gravel ballast roof. Even though it sounds kind of scary, it's pretty simple. It's not really that expensive, depending on if you're going to save the material or whatever. It's something similar that you would do on a gravel ballast roof, which is also very common. It's actually lighter weight than a gravel ballast in a lot of cases, so it's not a huge expense compared to a lot of other roofing systems.
I was curious to hear that just, it was the UV, so even putting gravel ballast would extend the life of the
Yeah.
the membrane. But would it extend it as long as a green roof? I'm thinking cooling and, you know, that it would still heat up with gravel ballast, it wouldn't as much.
That's a
with
good
a
roofing
green
question.
If you don't mind.
Go for it.
When you have a gravel ballast roof, what you don't cover is the flashing details, and those are the most sensitive parts of the roof. That's where your roof is going to fail. So no, you don't get the same benefit. You do in the plane of the roof, but that's not where your roof fails. It happens around the perimeters. So you still have those perimeters that are exposed to the UV and to the thermal expansion contraction cycles all day long where they're stretching. So no, you don't get this. You do get some benefit with gravel, but not the same as a green, and also you don't get the evaporative effect of cooling everything.
Because that's the kind of thing that I've gotten from a developer. It's like, well, why don't we just put the gravel on and we'll extend it?
I just jump in and say also you don't get the other multi-benefits. So I don't imagine you get some cooling, you would with the vegetative system as well, some of the habitat and other things that we're striving for in our new look at how these roofs function.
Not to mention the stormwater difference.
Yeah, which is where the RO, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when does a green roof pay for itself? One of the other presenters had said that it paid for itself once you re-roof because you extended that life. So that term is 40, 50 years, certainly it pays for itself inside of that. Do you have any idea of what
Yeah.
the average is?
So, good question. And, you know, it really does depend city by city. But let me just give you an example here in Portland where they have the FAR bonus. Lad Tower, done by Opus Development, which is a building around here, did, I think, 10,000 square feet of green roof. Tom, you might know the exact amount. Okay. Anyways, they were allowed to go an extra story up. I think it was 23 stories. And that can be worth a lot for a developer. So they took advantage of an FAR bonus, right? So that could be worth a lot. That's different than a stormwater piece. You could then have a city that actually lets you move through the permitting line faster than if you didn't. That could also be very valuable. And then there's the stormwater setup fees. So like in Seattle, for example, if the setup fees, and in this particular case, like I said, the setup fee was $300. By doing the green roof and the rainwater harvesting, It saved him 150. The green roof in this case was 50K, so you know how much the green roof was. And I'm not sure how much the rainwater harvesting is. I should probably grab that. But for them, it was a complete savings right off the bat before the even building went up. So, but that just depends on every city has and every area and what their fees are, their ongoing fees, if there's fines for stormwater runoff, or if they're using an FAR bonus. And are you talking about a particular city, like here?
Sounds like the advantage is incorporating it early in the process of the level versus adding it after everything's settled. It's just
If we don't get designed in with the engineers, we'll be pretty much value engineered out afterwards, because the roof is the last piece to go on usually, and it usually gets over budget, right? So definitely in the beginning phases, and we used to just work in the design phase with the architect community. Now we definitely are working with the engineering community. And it's very interesting because in DC, for example, a lot of the architects are because this green infrastructure movement is happening so quickly, and green infrastructure, if you're managing water, now involves the engineers. So in DC, for example, we'll see a lot of our architect firms now subbing out to an engineering firm who we'll work with. And these engineering firms now have landscape architects coming on board to help support the city's green infrastructure plan. So when you're working on that engineering level is when we get wrapped in with the civils a lot earlier, that we can tend to, it's part of the plan, basically. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have these types of, that the city's not, has these types of incentives and motives, it doesn't have to be subsidies, it's just, these types of things, the green roof usually, that's not why you're seeing the movement happen, definitely. Tom?
Because one of the other speakers talked about the cost benefit analysis that's done by the city in 2008, and that's on our website. Ours at Citizen.
Yes. Oh, it's yours, Tom.
Anyway, so it's some pretty good work. It's 2008, it's updated, but Jeff found it close enough for his presentation. So
Yeah.
It's got a pretty good structure. How the cost of the membrane was evaluated.
That's true. They do have a whole Excel thing in there, don't they? Is it a table? Okay. So thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, I'm going to welcome John Crumrine up to the stage. He's president of Enviroscapes Northwest, a specialty contractor focusing on structural landscape construction, including green roofs and living walls. He's been involved with green roofs for over 10 years and is recognized as a leader in the field of green roof technology and construction. And he's also led the business development efforts of GRIT, that you've already heard about from Matt, and is active in the group's work to build the industry. So please welcome John.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thanks for sticking around. Are you all getting something out of the program today? Are you learning anything new, or is this all relatively old hat, or same old, same old? In any event, as the introduction said, my name is John Crumrine. My business is Enviroscapes Northwest. I've been either peripherally or directly involved with green roofs for about 10 years since leaving a career in the IT field and wanting to do something of a more self-fulfilling, I guess, direct benefit to myself. And I've been involved in green roofs and living walls, like I said, for about 10 years. There's been a lot of great information that's already been delivered, and I'm really not sure at this point, being the last presentation, that I'm going to be plowing a lot of new ground. But I think what I'd like to do is sort of change the perspective a little bit and talk about it maybe in a little different direction than maybe just concentrating on the sustainability perspectives and looking at it from a different little way. Let's see, I'm a little frustrated here. Where's mine? Oh, I'm sorry, here it is. Sorry. There we go. So in any event, let's talk about the building envelope. let's talk about this from an architectural perspective. And let's talk about how green roofs and structural landscaping actually improve the performance of building envelope. And the building envelope is basically, the definition of that is it's the physical separation between the interior of the building and the exterior of the building. And it includes certain fundamental elements that we're all pretty much familiar with. The foundation of the building, the roof, the windows, the walls, the doors, everything that keeps the outside out and the inside in and helps manage the interior climate of the building. So the building envelope has a number of specific functions. Like I mentioned, it helps keep the outside weather out. We're primarily talking about precipitation, but also managing the indoor climate, making sure that it's warm in the wintertime and cool in the summer. Maintaining the aesthetics of the building envelope is also very important when you're buying finishes for your home or lighting or doors or windows. Obviously, you want something that's attractive. There is a benefit to that. And obviously, at the end of the day, you want to achieve these objectives at the lowest cost and make it low maintenance with a long service life. I'll have my marker ruler. So we're going to judge building envelope performance and how green roofs and structural landscape impact that based on these objectives and how well they work with that and how they enhance the performance. So basically, so far I've been talking about structural landscaping, and that falls basically into a couple of different categories of primary services: green roofs, living walls, and these basically, and I guess as the name would indicate, are basically using soil and plants and related natural processes to enhance the performance of the building envelope. So that's what we're going to concentrate on. Green roofs, what exactly are we talking about? As there's been mentioned here so far, we've got a number of different varieties. We have intensive roof gardens, which are more intended to replicate on-grade landscapes on the structure. What we're going to confine our discussion to more here today is extensive green roofs. These are the lightweight, thin systems that are purpose-built. They're actually specifically designed and specifically built to maximize functional benefits. And extensive green roofs are usually made up of a number of components that you'll find from project to project. These are common, really, whether you're talking about an intensive or an extensive roof. It always starts out with some sort of protection layer. The integrity of the membrane is of paramount importance. Nobody wants leaks, nobody wants problems. You don't want to have to come back and revisit that and have your owner spend additional money. So some sort of protection layer, either to protect from root penetration or from mechanical or physical damage, is very, very important. That goes down first. And really, it doesn't matter what kind of roof membrane you're talking about, whether a single ply or a built-up or what have you. Above that, you have a drainage layer, and basically that is the layer that allows the water, as it perks through the soil, to migrate laterally off the roof. There's a couple of different things that cause green roofs to fail more often than not. One of them happens to be poor drainage. We don't want to hold a lot of water in the soil. We want to keep to a saturated field rate, but no more. We want that migrating off because we don't want to build up additional weight. So drainage is extremely critical. There's a number of different products that perform very well for that. Above the drainage layer, you have a filtration layer, because basically what you don't want to have is silts and fines migrating out of your soil and off your roof. That's water pollution, and it's just a problem. So it helps keep the integrity of the soil longer, because the lightweight medium that we use is an engineered soil. So it's high in mineral content and has a very low content of organic material. So that filtration is very, very important to maintain whatever organic content you have in the soil over the longest period of time without having to augment it and going back up and doing things like that. And then obviously you have plantings on top of that. So as I mentioned, these are the typical components that you'll find on an intensive or an extensive green roof. Now this is kind of a challenging point, and this is where I'm really in the effort of trying to change perspectives on these things, where most of our conversations so far today have been talking about the sustainability aspects, and those are very, very important. But we're sort of moving away from that now. And one of the things that we have to understand is that, not in all cases, but in typical cases, a green roof is not a natural environment. We are not replicating nature. And in fact, as I mentioned they're usually completely contrived environments for a lot of the things that I mentioned. They have to be lightweight. Very few buildings are built with a lot of additional static load holding tolerance. It just costs more money to build the building that way, so the tolerances have to be very small. So lightweight is very, very critical. Usually the sweet spot for an extensive green roof is somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 to 24 pounds per square foot. We've installed them as light as 13 to 15 pounds per square foot, but anything below that gets really, really difficult because you're talking about very, very shallow soil depths, and it's very difficult to maintain the integrity of the plants, especially without supplemental irrigation. So lightweight is very, very important. Typically, we're planting with a succulent-based monoculture. Now, that's typically. So it's usually sedums or other succulent varieties of plants that we use. That's not to say that there aren't other things that can be incorporated into the plant palette, but what's typical is the succulent monoculture. That's obviously not a natural environment. Engineered soils, these are soils that are specifically formulated to make sure that they're lightweight and that they function as they're supposed to, but they're nothing like a planting soil that you'd find like in your garden or a topsoil or something like that. They're man-made. All of the additional components that I mentioned before that sit underneath the system are also man-made. And oftentimes, these green roofs are irrigated. Now, I think Tom has made some very, very compelling arguments about how we might be able to move away from that. And that would be a sort of a game changer in this field because it reduces the cost of the installation because now you don't have to spend the $1 to $1.50 a square foot to install an irrigation system. You can eliminate all the additional maintenance that goes along with that. And obviously, using potable water on a green roof is sort of antithetical to the whole conservation sort of mindset. So if we can get away from that, that would be a positive thing. So I'm looking forward to a couple of projects that we've actually got on the board right now where we're going to follow the red cinder mulch planting methodology. We'll see how that works. So how specifically do they enhance the performance of the building envelope? And some of these points have already been made. Obviously, stormwater management is one of the key metrics that we're looking for there. Slowing down the velocity of the water and how quickly it's being contributed to the stormwater system. The quality of the water as well. Once it perks through the soil and the filtration and all these other components, the chemical quality is improved. Protection of the membrane, as Vanessa was talking about before. The two elements, actually, I'm going to amplify a point that was made a little while ago by Liz. The two things that break down a roof more rapidly than anything else are exposure to UV and the fluctuation in temperature and the thermal cycles, because that causes the membrane to expand and contract, and that's what causes the failures. And now that you're not exposed to UV at all, except on the perimeter edges, and you have a blanket basically across the membrane, those temperature differentials are much more diminished. So you don't have as much expansion and contraction, and the non-exposure to UV, that's what contributes to the longevity of the membrane. And actually, to amplify another point that was made about, yes, the edges are exposed somewhat to UV, but they're isolated and they're visible, so the maintenance requirements are much less. So it's very much a benefit that way. The roof membrane maintenance is much less. You can inspect around the perimeter, make sure that nothing is going wrong there or have any problems. Out in the field, really the only indication that you've got a problem is when you've got a leak. And leaks, if you've got a qualified roofing contractor that when they're finished putting the roof on and the roof is watertight, and you have a qualified green roof contractor who knows how to work around membranes, the likelihood of leaks is very, very small. And there was also a point made earlier about electronic leak detection systems, which actually are a very inexpensive sort of security blanket for an owner that's really risk averse and is really concerned with leaks and things like that. There's a company called ILD, that's International Leak Detection Systems, and I believe the system that was shown earlier up on the screen is by them. It's the low voltage grid kind of system that they power it up, and then it creates a short, and it shows you exactly where the water is, and that makes it so that you can define in a very small area where that leak is. You come and you can expose that part of the roof and take care of it and put it back together, and without having to chase leaks along large portions of the roof. Just it simplifies the process quite a bit. And obviously, lastly, dramatically improves the aesthetics of the roof. This roof actually happens to be from a project that we did last fall up on the Canadian border. That is at the Peace Arch, which is the border crossing with Canada. And this actually was a reconstruction of a failed green roof. This green roof was installed in about 2007 prior to the Vancouver Olympics, because it's right on the Canadian border. Why did it fail? It's kind of the obvious question. Well, the filtration fabric that the contractor used in this case was a very heavy felt, almost like you'd find in road construction or underneath the subbase. And what happened was it silted up. They used a heavier soil. They used a soil that had a lot more organic content in it, and eventually the fabric actually silted closed so that it wasn't draining water at all. And then actually they covered the drains with this material. So they created a bathtub, if you will, a swamp. And this building had a load tolerance based on the engineering estimates of someplace around 27 pounds per square foot, which then we calculated into our design was about 3.5 inches of lightweight media and the other components, and we could fit within that parameter. We found as many as 8 to 10 inches of soil on that roof. So if you combine that with the amount of water that was saturating that soil, they probably had 60 or 70 pounds in the middle of the winter. So they could have really had a disaster. Now, the demolition of the previous roof, as they were saying, it's not overly expensive, but it's a heck of a lot of labor. So that took about 10 days to remove all the existing roof, all of the plant material that was up there, and get it all off, and then we reinstalled on top of that. But what we found was an absolutely pristine membrane. The membrane had not degraded at all. It was in like new condition. And actually, that's been the situation on 2 other projects that we've done where we demolished and removed and replaced the green roof, both here in Portland. One was at the Ecotrust building. Some of you may be familiar with that. I think I've even taken some of you up there for tours. That had a similar problem. That was installed in about 2002. I think the Ecotrust building was one of the first LEED certified for its historical buildings in the whole country, maybe if not on the West Coast. And what happened there was, that was an incomplete installation. There was no drainage layer on that roof. But 2002 was kind of the dark ages. I mean, we've really only evolved this technology over the last 4 or 5 years to the point where we've reduced the risks and we have a repeatable model that we can be confident in. So when we removed that roof, what we found was an absolutely pristine membrane. And that membrane was about 8 years old. So the question about how does it impact the longevity of your roof, the answer is dramatically. Like Tom was saying, some roof deck installations where we've done intensive roofs over parking decks and things like that are 50, 60, 70 years old still have membranes that are perfectly fine. So we really don't know how long it takes for these things to fail. But I think one of the lessons learned there is if you're going to build a building and put a green roof on it, buy the best membrane that you can afford. It seems sensible, but you'd be surprised. I mean, everything hits the budget floor at a given point, and things do get value engineered out, like Vanessa was saying. But the bottom line to this is there are economic benefits associated with all of these, including the dramatically improves aesthetics point. Ecoroofs, the thin, lightweight systems, do also improve the rooftop energy environment by the methods that we've already talked about before. By evaporative cooling, both of irrigation water or moisture in the soil, and by the plants actually transpiring moisture, that provides evaporative cooling, and that lowers rooftop temperatures. The plants and the soil also, they have more of a heat reflective quality to them too. So they reduce thermal transfer into the building. So not only do you have evaporative cooling going on, but you have a reduction in the thermal transfer of heat into the building, and those two combine to consequential energy benefits. Now, I will say this. They are much more consequential if you're in Phoenix, Dallas, Kansas City, someplace where you have a very hot summer. But if you have a commercial building in Portland and your air conditioning system starts running when the temperature hits 80 degrees, you're still going to be cooling the building for 2, 3, 4 months. And so if you are getting these kinds of benefits, you're going to see a reduction in your cooling loads and your energy costs. So the energy benefits are there. Sometimes they're hard to quantify, but they do exist. And lastly, by reintroducing nature into the built environment, we are enhancing the economic performance of the building envelope. This one's also a little bit harder to quantify, but it gets back into some of the other presentations that have been made. This kind of gets back into the concept of biophilia, which is a very interesting thing that I was at a presentation about a year ago and where they were discussing it. This is the whole concept of bringing nature back into the built environment. And basically what we've been doing with our urban development over the last 200 years pretty much is we've been forcing nature further and further outside of the city, further and further outside of the built environment. And what we've seen is correspondingly increased rates of stress and dissatisfaction and just unhappiness generally. What we've found is that people are actually much happier, much more self-evolved when they have access to green space, when they have access to nature, or at least plants. So obviously, green roofs are an excellent way to reintroduce nature into the built environment. And this has economic benefits, as were also discussed in previous presentations. You can charge more for rental spaces. Girding Eadlin development is a great example of this. They've been extremely progressive in Portland and elsewhere on the West Coast about introducing these sustainable technologies into their developments. And what they've found is, and they found this through market research, it's not by hit or miss, because companies like that don't make decisions without having very good cost-benefit analyses in place, is that they're making more money. They are having increased tenancy rates, so they have less open spaces. The tenants that are there are more satisfied. And also, they're creating amenity spaces off-grade on the buildings, and that also increases the tenants' satisfaction with the experience of living there. So I'll just leave you with this. When we're talking about building envelope performance, there is a formula for getting there, and I've sort of encapsulated it here for you. What we found through our experience is that an Ecoroof, this is once again the thin, lightweight, extensive system, with 2 to 3 inches of lightweight media, irrigation or not, because my mind is being changed on some of the irrigation things. Planted in a mix of sedums, because we know that's what works. And after all, that's what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to repeatable, reliable results. These things together offer the most practical and cost-effective way to get to maximizing the key benefits that I've been talking about. So this is the model. And that picture is of sedum cuttings that were planted about 3.5 months before that photograph was taken. And lastly, you can do this for $7 to $10 a square foot. Now, I'm not sure what the cost of a roof is, but I think that about doubles it. But then if you factor in that your roof might last 30, 40, 50 years longer, then that can allow you to put together some of the numbers so that you get to an idea of like what your rate of return is going to be. So that's what I had. I apologize for my initial nervousness up here. Any questions? Please, yeah.
I have a question about if you're using an engineered growing medium and the thing's going to last maybe 40 years, whatever, do you have to account for fertilizing, or do you expect that the sedum flower beds and stray material decomposing and whatever?
That's a great question, and it's actually one that I've been in conversations with the city about before, because what we'd like to do is add as little as possible, right? We'd like to leave it alone. And there's going to be some organic benefit to leaving the seed heads on and things like that. But what we've found actually is there are some organic fertilizers that we've tried. There's a place called Concentrates that you may have visited out towards Oregon City. And they have a line of organic fertilizers that have been created for use in organic farming. So there's no synthetic components involved in them. They're all naturally occurring nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And they're derived from things like feather meal and bone meal and things like that. And what we found is that that works really well. And we only use it at a very low application rate, maybe 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet, like once a year. So we're not overusing it. And actually, we've also looked at some micronutrient additives. There's a product called green sand, and it's mined from like ancient seabeds, and it has a high concentration of trace elements, so manganese and things like that we think might also help things out. But the question is really good because there's very little organic content in the soils, and that stuff does wear out over time. And we have seen stress conditions, and we sort of pondered why that was, and was it a nutrient condition? And so this is still a work in progress. We're still learning. But I think that the right kind of fertilizers in very low dose can be a really good idea. Only if you need it. There you go. There you go. Liz?
So, in your experience installing, what do you see as most commonly overlooked or overdone or what in Greenroofs?
Installation-wise or design-wise?
Yeah, design, installation, and what are the big mistakes that you're seeing?
The biggest mistakes are not over-design or under-design. They're just leaving things out, or improper installation, or, like I was saying, using the wrong components. And really, I think the industry is maturing now at a rate that most of the designers and the installers and the contractors have their knowledge base has grown. So they're using better stuff. Most of the real big problems we've seen on roofs that were maybe built during the sort of 2002, 2006 range, what I call the dark ages. It's really remarkable how much we've learned and how much better we're doing now than even that reason. So I don't know whether that answers the question or not. But not that I've seen. Just qualify your contractor. Make sure that they've done this before and that they have a track record of success. That's what I would recommend. Please.
I realize our climate is a lot different in Chicago than it is here, but the Walmart store in Chicago recently completed a study. They did exactly half the roof covered in vegetation, and I don't think it's been published yet, but I think I can tell people this.
Well, I
that
think it's
it's
state update. It's out there somewhere.
good. But the energy savings was actually more in the winter than in the summer.
Right.
For Chicago, though. And that
That's
would be a lot
interesting.
different than here. But that really surprised me, because I always thought that more energy savings would be in the summer.
Well, you're right, and actually, and I'm not a thermal expert, but saturated soil it conducts heat very readily. So that's why in our climate, once again, people have sort of been questioning of what the energy benefits might be. Like in the wintertime, our soil is going to be saturated like 100% of the time. Now in Chicago, it may be a little bit different. More snow, maybe less frequent precipitation. Maybe you've got ice and snow on the roof that aren't necessarily melting right away. So they may be, they may be drier for longer periods. So if the soil is dry, then that's going to mitigate that heat sink kind of effect that you get drawing heat out of the building.
Somebody mentioned the study, the calculator, ESU has done.
Right.
So, and that calculator is actually able to counts all of the country. So it'll be interesting to test Chicago relative to that and see what's that calculator saying. Same thing with the counties. But it is stated in this calculator, when you run it, that our best benefit is in the winter. That's what the calculator says.
Okay.
Not me. I'm not a calculator though, and that's what it says.
Right, right. Well, it's counterintuitive, but maybe it's something that we should look into more. Yeah.
So are the installers getting to the point where you can specify a warranty on the green roof?
Well, sure, but the warranties are usually generated by the manufacturers of the products that go in, and then the installers are usually certified by those manufacturers. So the manufacturer will say, we've looked at X, Y, and Z contractors, and they have demonstrated a level of expertise that allows us to certify them on our system. And then when you build their product in, then they will cover it with their warranty. That's kind of how it works. Yeah, that's probably the best way to explain that. Does that answer your question? What's that?
What about your company doing a project or something since some of this equipment, it's not under a manufacturer's umbrella?
Right.
You do it, for instance, is that what you're asking about the landscape needs?
We'll typically, we're required to provide a 2-year workmanship warranty on materials. The plant material itself is usually not under warranty, because the fact of the matter is, if we're not hired to maintain it, and we maintain probably 2/3 of the projects that we've done. We want to put ourselves in line for that, for obvious economic reasons, and also because we're in the best position to take care of it and make sure that it performs right. And at this stage in this industry, we need properly performing roofs and things that are working, because otherwise it's sustained, and it causes us to slide backward. People will point at things and say, well, do you want one of those kind of thing? So 2-year warranty on workmanship. The longer warranties about overburden removal and replacement and things like that are usually provided by the membrane manufacturers.
Where's the insurance industry's perspective on this? Do they charge a premium, or are there some people who won't insure? I know maybe it's gotten better, but
There's been some interesting movement by Factory Mutual, who's the big, I guess they provide rates, actuarial rates about, for assessing risk in these kinds of things. I don't know. I don't know about the insurance companies and how they're playing. And I know that we've been looking at certain aspects of green roofs and green roof benefits that really we haven't talked about very much. Like, for example, I have a feeling that green roofs in California, which catches fire every fall, and we see on the news, we see these horrible conflagrations of fire sweeping across the hills and million-dollar residences burning to the ground. It stands to reason that if you've got soil and succulent plants on your roof, you've just mitigated a lot of your fire risk. So we'll see. There's some work that needs to be done in that avenue, but there's lots of different forces at play there, and people are protecting certain businesses. Like, for example, I've heard anecdotally, I can't point at any one HVAC manufacturer, but I've been told at least that because the net effect of lots of green roof installation is lower urban temperatures and lower ambient air temperatures on roofs, that means smaller HVAC units, lighter cooling loads, maybe longer duration of existing HVAC units, which means that they sell fewer and smaller machines. And so they have actually lobbied, they're one of the more aggressive lobbying arms to kind of forestall the growth of this. So you can't always, there's lots of different forces that are looking at this.
A comment on the building insurance. I know for Factory Mutual, they have a set of standards or recommendations
Sure.
for buildings with green roofs. As far as rock ballast areas or not using grasses. So I mean, it seems like they're fine with it. They just have recommendations or requirements in order to insure the building.
Yeah, among the things that I sort of glossed over at the beginning was I wanted to talk a little bit about the thermal transfer and the issue of rock ballast versus green roof in terms of energy savings and ambient air temperature. And somebody did mention, rightly so, the stormwater management aspect. Obviously, you're not going to get the same stormwater management benefit out of a ballasted roof as you are out of a roof with engineered laminated soil on it. But that thermal benefit as well of having soil and plants on the roof is going to outweigh the thermal benefit that you would get from having a ballasted roof too, because there's going to be a greater opportunity for heat transfer through the rock once it heats up during the day than there is going to be through plants and soil, which reflect a lot of the heat back. So that's another sort of, looking at one way of covering a roof versus another. Yes, you're protecting from UV, but UV is only one of the mechanisms that degrade your membrane.
Are the warranties extended with maintenance agreements?
They sure can be. We do.
And we do that as an agency.
Right.
Within our specifications to be established.
What is the average cost of the maintenance dollars per square foot?
That's a really good question, and it kind of varies depending on what's planted and how difficult it is to access and certain things like that. I think a good range would be anywhere from 25 to 50 cents a square foot per year would be a reasonable ballpark. And maybe a little bit less, and maybe a little bit more depending on the breaks, like I said. How far you have to travel to it, We actually did a fairly large green roof at New Sandy High School about 2 years ago. And we have a 2-year maintenance responsibility out there, and that's a long way to go. You know, when I'm having to go out there or send a crew out there once a month to pull weeds and things like that, that's, you know, an hour a week to climb each direction per man. So that's going to make that one more expensive. But if it's right here in the city and it's easy to get to and you don't have to climb up, you know, various hatches to get out on the roof and things like that, it's less money. But I think 25 to 50 cents is probably
Do you know how that compares to typical roof maintenance requirement?
no idea.
That issue is in the cost analysis that was done by the city in 2008.
We're
ready to
going
go.
to wrap this up.
Okay.
Thank you. And actually, I think John's presentation was kind of a good summary of a lot of what we've already heard today, so I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank all the presenters. I think we saw some amazing diversity of why people are thinking about eco-roofs today. And we started out talking about healthcare and stormwater and the economic return on investment and heat island and habitat and open space and energy and food production and aesthetics. So I mean, I think this is really an indication that eco-roofs, green roofs, this technology is really coming into its own for any variety of reasons in our urban areas, and all the more reason to be advancing the science, the technology, and our support for them. I think another thing we saw, particularly from Chicago, is that there are any number of ways that you can support eco-roofs or green roofs through incentives as well as through regulation. And so our challenge here, as we have a changing climate politically as well as other things, is how do we want to continue our support and be sure that this is not only a growing industry but a healthy environment for people and for the critters and our air and water and everything else. So we've seen low-tech approaches and we've seen high-tech approaches. There's no one right answer. I think all the speakers acknowledge that today. It's really what your objectives are and how you want to go about it. But certainly there's something for everyone. And so I think that's a good news item. And clearly also we saw here in our last presentations that there's a growing industry and there is a return on investment. And I hear people asking, give us more of that information, give us more of that data. And so I think that's one of the things that maybe we can take back is try and assemble that to the degree that we can to make sure that you have the tools available to all of your clients, whether they be your local school district or your local government or your private developer. So we'll try and assemble that so that's readily available to the degree we can. I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank all of our organizers, Matt, and all the volunteers. So now is the fun part. So please stick around for our refreshments and for networking. And the raffle. The raffle, which is right here. Well, I won't look.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to pick? You pick.
Yeah, you should pick.
I don't
Or we could get.
Oh, Michael, come up and pick. You're our keynote speaker. Sure, why not?
So we did post on the sign you had to be present to win, so you are all in the lucky majority at this point. Which book is this for? The top one?
Okay.
Noel Struder Bevick.
This is Wild in the City, Exploring the Intertwine, Part 2, by Michael. Initial.
Deborah Abell.
See how? What is it really? All right.
All right.
So do we come down and pick them up?
Oh,
Yes.
we'll bring in Steve. Oh, so you're right.
Sure.
Sure.
Second book, The Green Roof Manual by Ed Snodgrass and Linda McIntyre.
Corey Peterson from Pacific Landscape. try not to.
And next, we have the professional design guide of Ecoroofs. And is this the one that has the intro?
Yeah.
By you. All right. It's signed and autographed.
James Henke from Sustainable Walkable Places. No?
Not too bad.
The forward is riveting. Sarah Jane Ferber from Thrive Landscape Design.
Last but not least, ooh, look at this one, the vertical wall. The vertical garden, excuse me, from nature to the city. Patrick Wall.
John Menschlaw.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and enjoy yourselves. The vendor showcase, the bigger part of it will start now. There's beer outside, it's sunny, beer's free and ready to be ready for it to be drank, whatever the word is. It's been a long day and some stuff to snack on, so please stick around and come say hello. I'd love to meet the folks I haven't met yet. It was nice meeting you.